that DevFest, the one that you came to,
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
had this one speaker who brought his parents to the event because he'd been waiting to speak at MAD for like 4 or 5 years. And he was just so proud of that moment finally happening.
Yeah.
That is where our imposter syndrome kicked in.
Hey Faiz, hey Swapnil, welcome to
Hey.
my channel.
Hi, Rivu.
So, hi everyone,
Hey.
welcome to you all to my channel as well. And let me give a very brief introduction of Faiz and Swapnil. So, they both are designers and running one of the biggest Android developer communities in the country. Mad Meetup. Earlier, used to be known as Mad Meetup, and currently it is known as GDG Mad. And they recently did a dev fest a couple of months ago, and it was really big, about 500 attendees that came.
800.
800.
800, and lots of RSVPs. So yeah, during the dev fest they were telling how many RSVPs were there, and they ended up randomly uh, anonymously selecting attendees, and yeah, 800 attendees in a dev fest. And yeah, it was a very big success. And so you are doing this for a long time now, and I know you for what, for 6 to 7 years now. So I was thinking of bringing your story to the public, and how you started the community, how it came to mind, and how it's been going so far. So that's what I will be discussing, and I will also be discussing about career, because you both of you have achieved a lot in career. Both of you do mentoring as well. So yeah, if you can share something with my viewers, that would be great. So let's get started. Let's start with, if you would like to introduce yourself a little, that would be great.
Hey, I'm Swapnil and I'm a product designer. I have been mostly working in startups around in Mumbai, etc. And apart from that, I think one of the reasons that we started GD Mad, because as students, I think one of the reasons that we found that was really helpful to us was being part of a tech community. And at least for me, I think the reason also how I met Faiz was by going to one of these events, right? He was a speaker in that event and we both met over there and we became great friends. And I think this applies to most of the people, right? So in college, etc., I think a lot of emphasis is given on the education that you receive in college, which is important, but it's also important how much you network. This is true for
Yeah.
both professional and college. So with these networks, what do you do and how you come to being with the whole professional setting and your professional life is what makes or breaks you, right? Because if you know someone somewhere, you can always ask them a favor, and most likely they'll be more than happy to refer you in their company.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the entire thing came from. So through these networking, through these connects, you get to know more people, and through one person, it's like a network effect for your own self, right? Like if you are your own product, what will you do, right? You have to sell yourself at times to people. So judging by that, I think the reason that we wanted to make this, and we saw the community system in Mumbai itself was not at par of what we wanted it to be, and instead of joining something else, we wanted to create one of our own. Luckily, we had some great support from people all across, from Google, from everyone else, all the well-wishers, etc. And we held this over time since 2016 now. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and a little bit about what we've started. Anything else you would like to know, let me know.
Sure. First, let's get Faiz's introduction as well, and then we'll discuss a lot more about Mad.
Yep.
Yeah, I wish Swapnil had left something for me to say. Okay, I am not a designer anymore. I did design for 6 to 7 years of my career. For the past 2 years, I've been doing hardcore product and product strategy. But coming from that background, both of us, we realized that it's important to understand how people think. And I think part of the reason we succeeded is that, and this is a running joke, we were students who were designers running a community for professionals who are developers.
Yeah.
Basically, we wanted developers in the companies we work for so that they can develop what we design. But yeah,
Okay.
I think being designers sort of helped us understand early on how people think, what what they need from these meetups, how to better the experience so that the community is more giving for them. Like Swapnil mentioned, our first introduction was at a meetup at IIT Bombay. The first
Okay.
conversation we had was about how long an elevator ride was taking. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, nowhere related to where we are today, but I think we both love to complain about irrelevant things. Uh, yeah, so I've been working in the community space in Bombay for about 11 years now. Uh, I was volunteering at a bunch of communities before, and around 2015-16 is where Swapnil and I identified that there was a gap in the community scene in Mumbai,
Mhm.
purely because there were a bunch of communities doing fantastic work, but the niche that we wanted to fill was more of a casual meetup, not a
Mhm.
strictly professional one where people just come, listen to talks, and leave, but more
Mhm.
somewhere where people can call home, where they meet
Yeah.
like-minded people, where they form connections that last. And it did that sort of did happen, because even now, looking back, we have formed lifelong friends, connections, acquaintances over the past 8 years, and that has helped us grow personally and professionally in ways that we never imagined back then. So
Mhm.
yeah, been about 8 years for Mad, just keeps
Yeah.
growing, sort of grown beyond our two people control now. We're a six people team.
yep,
And in the past few months, what we've realized is that there are so many communities in the city.
Mhm.
All of us have the same goal. We're divided by the tech and the company that backs us.
Yeah.
All of us have the same goal of people being upskilled, people being hired,
Mhm.
and meeting like-minded people. And what we're currently
Yeah.
working towards is just helping people in Mumbai achieve everything that they have the potential to achieve.
Mhm. That's great. So yeah, I will come back to collaborating between communities, but yeah, first let's get started on how Matt started, right? So you already described what your mindset was when starting. I was about to ask that question, but you already answered that. So why Android? Why not anything else, right? It could have been design, it could have been iOS, it could have been all mobile. Why Android?
So the least complicated answer is that both of us were studying an Android Nano degree at the time.
Okay.
Uh, we also had a bunch of connections in the Android community. So that we knew that when we did eventually put together a meetup, if we did it around Android, we could reach out to these few people and get an audience.
Makes sense.
And we were both very early on in our design careers. If we had tried to do a design meetup, we would probably not have got the audience pool that we did. Even for Android, we were kind of worried because I remember our first event was at the Bombay Stock Exchange, and
Mhm.
we had no idea how to really market it. So we put out a Google form for RSVPs, and for the first half an hour or so, there were like 5 people who showed up, and we were concerned that this is going to be the potential that we hit 5 people at a meetup, right? But yeah, and the fright was real. But by the end
Yeah.
of, let's say, 1.5 hour into the event, it was at 100 people, and that was
Okay.
completely different thought process because we don't expect 100 people to show up through our Twitter accounts, right? So it
Uh-huh.
sort of reinforced that we did pick the correct niche to start. Since then, we have,
Mhm.
of course, expanded beyond Android, but I think that was a decent starting point for us.
Yeah, makes sense. And so, what was the initial? Like you said, initially you got 100 people, starting from 5 people to 100 people. But after that, how regular did you organize meetups?
I think we did it every month, at least for the first 2 years, 2 to 3 years. I
Mhm.
think we did it every month because the 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 effect we wanted to create is have some place to go, right? Because you see
Uh-huh.
professionals like designers, developers, etc. They face
Yeah.
issues like very often, right? And you need
Mhm.
a place to be and call home at, right? Like how Faiz
Yeah.
mentioned. So the eventual discussion was like, how often do we keep it? And that time we had a lot of time in our hands. I wish we still did, but uh, we had a lot of time in our hands, and we could actually organize this every month, month on month. And we saw a lot of repeat people. We saw a lot of new faces, and every month we used to be like, oh, a lot of new faces have turned up. And this was all over in the south of South Mumbai, which is in Bobby Stock Exchange, which was courtesy of Zone Startups. They had a place for us every fourth Saturday, and every fourth Saturday we used to. So we almost built a mental model, right? If you think of terms of design. So if you think of mental models, every fourth Saturday it'll be in the same place, same time. So we wanted to build that, and initially we had like a lot of themes, etc. And we can get over that in a while. But yeah, it was every month.
Okay, so you had only one place set for every month.
We did, yeah.
Uh,
We
Great.
had spoken to the. It was a startup accelerator.
Uh-huh.
They were very gracious to give us space, and we had a recurring agreement with them that every fourth Saturday, 10 to 2,
Great.
we'll need the space. And that reinforced what Swapnil said, right? People knew there was something happening, same place, same time, every fourth Saturday. So it became a fixed thing on people's calendar rather than people having to wait for forms to open, registrations to start. It was just people
Yeah.
knew that this is where they had to be on the fourth weekend, and they
Mhm.
show up. And we had a lot of conversations with people on what they thought about this. The
Mhm.
general consensus was that it helped eliminate any guesswork as to whether something was
Yeah.
happening or not.
Yeah, this is actually very unique and very effective. I am hearing about it the first time. Although Kotlin Kolkata used to happen in only one place, but yeah, we didn't had a fixed date kind of setting. So yeah, this is very helpful. And if anyone is going to start a community, they can follow it. I would highly recommend to follow it. So yeah, how did you arrange to get speakers beside yourselves?
So initially, what happened was initially we started to get speakers from the connections we know. Initially, we used to just source speakers from who we know are doing really well in the industry, who we know, or we get leads from other people who our friends, etc., recommend. So, for example, in the first meetup, one of the speakers was Sri Raman, who helped us coin the idea of GDG Mad, like the Mad meetup idea, what we should call it. Another
Yeah.
speaker was I forgot his name, and now it's been so long. But if I do you remember the Android dev name, but he was speaking on RX Java or Jet. I think yeah, it was RX Java. But yeah, and I was speaking as well. That time I used to be a little too active in the speaking scene as well. So I was speaking on I think material design or something on those lines. I'm not even sure. So it's been a long time since then. But then we used to actually do themes. For example, we wanted to be Android focused, but we also wanted to have certain themes around it. So let's say one meetup's theme was design, Android, and business. So that's what we started with. Then we moved on to
Okay.
let's say product, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So based on these themes, we used to select speakers. And since we were very young in our career as well, we used like if we asked someone senior, etc., they would be more than happy to volunteer and speak because for them it's like, oh, I'm getting to speak and share my expertise. So we got a lot of
Yeah.
brought to the companies as well. Through a lot of Mumbai companies itself, a lot of people turned up. And to be honest, we were surprised at one point where speakers were themselves putting it on their LinkedIn, etc., to say, that we spoke at GDG Mat, we spoke at Mad Meetup, right? So it was a
Yeah.
huge thing.
Yeah,
In fact,
that's Faiz, please.
uh, one of the things that we realized early on was that somehow we were doing things right in a way that after the first meetup itself, we had a lot of people who came forward and asked, when this happening again? How can I speak the next time?
Yeah.
And something we tried to establish really early on, and it worked amazingly well for us over the years, was that we tried to have at least one first time speaker at every meetup.
That's
Because
great.
our aim was not just for people to come and learn, but also to grow alongside that.
Yeah.
So every time after the meetup, when the networking was on, we would talk to people, encourage them to speak at the next meetup.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the first 3 years, at least until COVID hit, at almost every meetup we had a first time speaker.
Yeah.
The
That's
reach
great.
that we created was great enough that we heard of this one speaker who came all the way from, I think, Gandhinagar, just to come and give his first
Mm-hmm.
talk at MAD. Right?
Wow.
Uh, and it has just grown over the years. Like even at DevFest, the one that you came to,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
had this one speaker who brought his parents to the event because he'd been waiting to speak at MAD for like 4 or 5 years, and he was just so proud of that moment finally happening.
Yeah.
That is where our imposter syndrome kicked in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. We are like, okay, wait, why? Like, so you almost think like, why? Because we think like we are just doing, oh, we're just doing this every day, right? And what is this certain amount of, oh, that we are so proud to speak at GDG Mad or Man Meetup. We are like, okay, why is it such a big thing, right? So, but yeah, coming to the point of where I said, like one of the things that we initially had agreed upon is that at least from the meetups we saw that were running at that point, one of the things that we saw was a bias was that only if you have been in an industry for let's say 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 years is you can get on the stage. We thought that is a
Yeah.
very bad precedent because that doesn't give you the younger people opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And when you need when you actually need the most like help and expertise, etc., or networking connections is when you're really young or just starting out, and you can make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
right? At that point, you can also make mistakes. So we wanted to give the stage to those people that okay, you know what, make mistakes, but at least we are enabling you to go out there and make those mistakes, right? Because when you're
Mm-hmm.
young, you're still introverted, you still don't know what's happening in the entire thing. And I think that's when you require the biggest cheer, right? So empowering people, I think, is the main aim any community should even have. And I'm glad we could at least do whatever we could, like in our little initiative over here to empower new speakers.
Yeah, you empower a lot of people, right? So I have a lot of friends who are junior developers in Mumbai, and they regularly attend MAD meetups. Right? At least before COVID, they used to. Right. So yeah. Now, coming to a question, we talked about MAD meetup and GTG MAD quite a few times. So how did MAD meetup become GTG MAD? What was the process, and what was the thinking, why you became a GTG?
So we were doing Mad Meetup for about 3 years,
Yeah.
just as an independent standalone meetup focused on. I think our underlying theme was just good vibes.
Mhm.
Uh, we had achieved, I think, at the moment when this process started, and this was somewhere in July 2018.
Yeah.
We had a reach of about 7.5 to 8,000 developers in the city, of which we had about 200 recurring for every event that we did. And this was regardless of the space that we had. Like I remember there was one meetup at the Pepperfry office where there were people sitting in each other's laps, people sitting on the floor. Uh, so we had grown significantly in reach. There was a notable absence of a GDG in Mumbai at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a gap that was needed filling.
Yeah.
We were, at the time, we were also, both Swapnil and I were working closely with Google on other programs, like
Yes.
the Google for Startups program, the Launchpad program.
Mm-hmm.
Both of us were, I think, GDEs at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just from conversations that we had with Googlers, we realized that there was a natural fit. There was a gap to be filled. We were a community that was inclined towards Google's initiatives and
Yeah.
could fill that gap. So we had a conversation with someone at DevRel at Google.
Mm-hmm.
They offered us that join the GDG program. From our perspective, our internal discussion was that we are sort of hitting a glass ceiling of scale
Mm-hmm.
where we can only scale so much with our own brand. And beyond
Yeah.
that, we probably need the backing of a giant like Google to
Mm-hmm.
get in new faces. Uh,
Yeah.
Hearing about a Mad meetup happening in Mumbai is interesting. Hearing about a Google developer group meetup happening in Mumbai is infinitely more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that was our internal agreement. It was not so much discussion as much as a "this is cool, let's do it" kind of thing. It lasted 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And for Google, like I said, there was a need to
Also,
be filled.
No, go ahead.
No, I was wrapping up anyway. All yours.
No, I was saying, also, I think it wouldn't have been possible if that DevRel person was not the one communicating with us. I think that person also showed a lot of interest and overall enthusiasm in us as well. Because if you think of it in this perspective, right? Conglomerate is coming to give you the brand. So obviously you have some sort of thing, okay, if we will lose our identity, etc. Right? So we wanted to also regain our identity as MAD because those are the values we embody, right? So that's why we did not choose a city name, because I think we wanted to keep city as a center, but we didn't want to lose our identity while doing that. That's why we chose the name MAD and not Mumbai. And I think we still receive questions around that, like why are you GDG MAD, whereas there are multiple city names in the chapter. But I think the identity was key to the part that, we don't want to lose this because these are some strong values we have embodied. But yeah, that was one of the key things about it. And I think this journey was interesting, and that's a very interesting question as well, Rivu, because we had an internal discussion as well. Okay, like should we, like Faiz mentioned, we had a lot of internal discussion. Like, okay, should we do this? Should we not do it? But we hit the glass ceiling. Also, there were other benefits, right? Because if you think of the entire GDG chapter as a whole, they have some incredible values that you can embody. Like some of these values itself, we were ourselves following that. But there are a lot of these other things that they have the community summits. They have a lot of these other things to teach you on how to become a better community leader. So for the benefit of our own community and for the benefit of everyone else, I think this was the right step in that direction, where we can also grow, have these connections to have more venues where we were stagnating in this amount of space we had and the amount of attendees we were getting. So we wanted to also expand that, while also getting a larger body like Google helped us to also connect with multiple more speakers, help get more GDs in the loop like you, right? And that's how we grow, right? I mean, we cannot scale beyond a point. That's why do you think companies also, right? A lot of companies also that sell to bigger companies, right? So that's because of some strategic direction, etc. So I think that was the right time for us to do that, and we were actually honored to get that as a. So we didn't reach out to them. Google themselves reached out to us. So that also was a big win for us from that perspective, as a source of validation after 2 or 3 years of having the community. So
that's really great to hear. And so I heard of MAD even before you guys became GDG, right? So I think I came to Mumbai before becoming GDE. So 2019 or no 20. What was the last Dev Fest before the COVID? I was
19.
there, right? Last Dev Fest before the COVID and first Dev Fest after the COVID. I was in both. So I think at that time I was not a GDE, but So
hey, well, see, you came to our DevFest, you became a GD.
Exactly. So now moving a little towards career, right? Swapnil, you can go first. So you said you started this when you were juniors, right? A similar thing happened with me when I started committee. I was kind of a junior engineer, so how did your career grow throughout the years, and did becoming part of a community help you? Did becoming part of a developer community help you, or let me rephrase, being connected with so many developers and knowing how developers think help you as a designer?
Okay, so to start with, I definitely got a lot of Rippl money for sending developers to companies. I'm kidding. So, but to be all jokes aside, I think one of the greatest thing was being connected with so many developers. You get to think on, because see, tech is a big part of anything you do, right? So, for example, if you are working in a tech company, even if you do design, even if you do product, the final thing that it goes to and what gets developed is by developers, right? So being connected with so many of them, you understand on how they think, on how you should design, or how you should be thinking through when you design or write a PRD, or even in that sense, right? So
Mhm.
from that perspective, I think it definitely helped. Even when I think we started this when I was like in my master's, I don't even think I started my first internship. So when we started this out, and when we did started out, I think I went through a couple of internships. Then I actually went to a full-time job, etc. While I was still doing this, and one of the
Mhm.
biggest validation that I got was from some of the founders themselves saying that the developers that are working in the company, why don't you also invite them to the community, because they could learn a lot,
Mhm.
right? And this was while I
Yeah.
was working, so it was crazy good for me to get that validation, like, okay, you know what,
Mhm.
people want other developers to also join and learn in this
Yeah.
community, right? So from my career's perspective, I think it helped a lot for me to make these connections. One of the reasons I could score a few jobs were also through these community people, right, who I knew through
Mhm.
the community, through their referrals. So I think it has played a big part in my role as well.
Mhm.
Before in my masters, at least, what I was doing is I was connecting with a lot of people to get my networking better, right? And that's how I connected with
Mhm.
such stellar people in the community to help propel
Mhm.
my career as well.
That's really good to hear. And now coming to you, Faiz. So you already said you started as a designer, built a developer community, and then moved to product career, right? So how was the journey, and what was your thought process on moving, switching from designer to product?
So something I rarely admit, but is I think somewhat common knowledge, is that before I started design, I was an engineer for 2 years.
Mhm.
Uh, I was an Android and web engineer.
Okay.
From I think when I was 16, I landed my first job as an Android engineer.
Wow.
Uh, and early on, it was what I loved to do. I loved
Mhm.
writing code. Java was all the rage back then. I think we were building in Eclipse. There was no Android Studio
Yeah.
also,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I love doing it, but I'm also a very highly opinionated person on everything. So
Mhm.
uh, the designer that I was working with, I was receiving handoff,
Mhm.
and I just had opinions on maybe I can do this better. So I started experimenting, right? And I
Mhm.
experimented. And there was no Sketch or XD or Figma back then. It was like pure
Yeah.
Photoshop for designs. And so I was
Yes.
experimenting with redoing some of the designs in Photoshop.
Uh,
And I realized I was spending more time doing that than actually writing code. And it sort of became like maybe I should look down this path instead. One
mhm.
of my closest friends was also doing something similar. He had started his journey on design,
Mhm.
and some of my conversations with him made me realize that this is something I like doing more.
Mhm.
So I made that early transition from engineering to design very early on in my career. Where I definitely think Mad helped me was that for the next 7 years or so, while I was actively pursuing design as a career, I was
Mhm.
still writing hobby code on the side. Right now, you can't pay me to write
That's
code,
great.
but I still write. To this day, I still write code as a hobby.
That's
And
great.
because I wasn't writing code as a job, I needed some way to keep up to date with what was happening in the developer world,
Mhm.
understand best practices and all of that. And Mad helped me there because I could stay connected to a developer community while pursuing design as a full-time career. To your specific question of how the next transition happened, and there's too many transitions already, but towards the like fourth or fifth year in my design career, I realized I'm more of a UX person than a UI person. I like
Yeah. Okay.
understanding why products don't work. How can you improve conversion rates? How can you improve
Mhm.
user experience? That kind of thing. And the more I explored UX, the more I realized that there is an overlap here between this and deciding the features themselves.
Mhm.
So, as a UX designer, I was figuring out why features don't work. The natural thought
Mhm.
process that came after it was that why this feature in the first place? Like,
Mhm.
can I go back to the user interviews and the user research, see what's not working for them, and
Mhm.
propose a different solution rather than try to optimize the solution that was given to me?
Mhm.
And there's a trend here of me questioning people I work with, but that was a natural thing for me. Like I started exploring uh, how
Uh,
product features have come about, how you turn something like a conversation with a user into a tech feature, and that solutioning was something that attracted me a lot. Uh, in the past couple of years, I have sort of leveled that up, where I just don't do product management anymore, but I also do product strategy. Because I think from day one, like from the time I was 16 and writing code, in hindsight, I realized it was not the writing code or doing UI or conducting user interviews that was calling me. It was more the problem solving that was calling me. If I look at the trend of my career over the past 10 years, it's that is what attracted me more than anything else. To this day, it's the form and shape might have changed. Maybe I was problem solving for compilers first and then Figma second and businesses third. But it's always problem solving that has been my go to. And nowadays, I'm doing it on a business level. I'm exploring conversion rates and acquisition costs and ROIs. But at its core, it's about helping people solve problems.
That's great. Now, coming to that designer and developer again. So, you two are the best designers I know, right? So, what's your recommendation to developers? Should we also start attending or looking into designer meetups to be more familiar with designing thought process and all those? Should we do that to become better developers?
So I think from my perspective, and Faiz, if you want to go first, let me know. But from my perspective, I think it's always better to know more things, right? You can never be restricted to only one pattern, right? So, for example, one of the things that I think, at least for startups, etc., is really good is the design sprint methodology, right? So, if you think from a developer perspective, it will make so much sense because I don't know how many developers I would ask, but maybe you're building a feature and then someone in the business or the product team will decide to scrap that feature entirely, right? And there'll be so much hurt around that itself. So when design comes, when we speak about design, a lot of people think it's just UI, pixels, etc., right? But it's more than that, right? Like Faiz said, it's more about problem solving and also understanding what goes into it, right? Like why would the user use this feature rather than using something else? So from a perspective of a developer, surely that helps you when you're thinking in terms of how do I implement this, but it helps you beyond that even more, right? Like, for example, one of the things that I did when I was in college and I was going through my first few internships, me and my another friend we used to just go. This was around in Powai area. We used to just go and during lunch breaks and ask people randomly on the road, like, what's the time? So now we used to check because that's when the watches and smartwatches were also like literally like they were seeping into the market. We used to check if they look at their watch or they look at their phone, because the phone penetration was so high that time that everyone used to check their phone. So we had a lot of understanding that, right? Okay, if I ask someone the time, will they first check the watch or will they check their phone, right? So things like these, right? Things like these is where your curiosity is explored. So definitely, I think developers, if they want to be are more curious and they would like to see more on how things work or why are some problems solved versus why are some problems not picked up. I think those are some things you should try in terms of design. And when I say design, you could also explore the UI part of it. Whereas, a lot of developers nowadays are very, very pro about, okay, some UIs look brilliant, some UIs have animations, whereas some don't. Like, why is animation prioritized in one company, whereas animation not prioritized in a different company? Or why is UI prioritized like to an extent of like it's like worshipped in one company, whereas in another company it's like whatever ships, just ship it, right? So it all comes down to what your company culture is as well, right? So maybe your company X might not want great UI, but company Y might want the best UI because the users are different. Again, it comes down to what do your users want or how can you make their lives better, right? So I think it's definitely a great thing for you to know design, and even for that matter, product also for developers. So that as much as like Faiz said, if you're questioning people more, right, you tend to also understand what is going on in that behind the scenes, and maybe tomorrow you want to solve that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thanks, Swapnil, for that. And Faiz.
I think just to add on to what Swapnil said, I think both sides have a lot to learn from each other.
Yeah.
The amount of times I have seen designers coming up with fancy animations that is impossible to write in code. just
Yeah.
too many times. At the same time, the amount of times I've seen developers just set your text style to display one or display two or heading one or heading two without understanding why a certain way is specified is also too much. I think both sides should explore a little bit about the other side just so that they understand the rationale that is going into the decision making. It helps that handoff process, which is, I think, one of the most
Yeah.
full processes in a company. It helps make that a little bit easier. That being said, I think two things that I would caution any developer exploring uh, design is that one, explore how much you need to, otherwise you'll end up like me. You'll become a designer. Two, do not treat Dribble as your source of design inspiration. Design is
Okay.
everything that you see UI. It's not just to make it look good, but there is a thought process as to why the designer has put certain things there. So every developer looking at Dribble for UI inspiration and then replicating it, you're probably ignoring the weeks of decision making and just looking at the end product.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that was a great session. Now, uh, you have, Faiz, you have done engineering, design, and product, all three of them, right? So, yeah, what's your suggestion for young people starting out? It may be as a developer, it may be as a designer, it may be as a product manager, right? What's your suggestion to them?
I have a very unorthodox suggestion. And people are usually surprised when they hear me say this, purely because of how different my career trajectory has been. But I think as much as we like to shit on colleges and the how boring the lectures are there and the DSA processes, I think that sets you up for a base that will carry you through your entire life. Because you go to a
Mhm.
even an L5 interview at Google or any other fan company, you are going through DSA problems, right?
Mhm.
And that's like your second year of college. And in that mindset, you are thinking that I'm never going to actually use this in life. I don't need to know how linked list works or how binary trees work. But it's important to at least understand that base, because the amount of times it will help you make the difference between average code and good code will just exponentially increase as you go more and more up the developer chain. Because the more senior you get, then it's not about whether or not you can solve a feature. It's about your where in the big O notation scale your feature lies, right? Are you writing a bad performance? Are you writing good performance? And that goes down to the core understanding of how data structures work, how graphics render. All of that is super important.
Mhm.
So to an engineer starting out, I think it's important to understand that base. Uh, to a designer starting out, I would just keep recommending the importance of design systems. I get this question a lot, and I think almost every designer goes through this. People saying that, oh, were you good at art as a child, or did you know how to draw when you were younger, right? But design is not a creative process. If you ask any mid to senior level designer, they're just combining multiple design systems and design component kits and making their UI, right? Because it's more about knowing what to put where and then tapping into an existing either platform level design or a brand level design. So, but for that, you need to have a core understanding of how design systems work. So, I would recommend any junior designer to not try to be creative early on, but more try to be creative in the problem solving aspect, and
Mhm.
then use UI kits and design systems as your building blocks. For product, and I'm increasingly seeing a lot of people gravitating towards product. My view is that you can't go from straight out of college to product.
Mhm.
It's not, you probably can, like, you can probably do a APM course and land an internship and go down that path.
Mhm.
But I would highly discourage it purely because I think to be a good product manager or product strategist, you need to have a core understanding either how systems work or how people work.
Yeah.
Which is why over the years you've naturally seen senior engineers turn product managers or senior designers turn product managers. This
Mhm.
trend of freshers turning product managers is new, and I think it is not the best for the industry. Because
Mhm.
if you're specking business requirements into a feature and you don't know how that is going to look on the back end, what kind of architecture it's going to follow. Is it going to be an API solution? Is it going to be an SDK? If you don't know these core engineering terms, you are out of touch. Then you're not a product manager. You're just an email proxy between business and engineering. Um, at the same time, you can also not have that, but you can have a solid understanding of people and their problems and what works for them, what features work for them, what UI works for them, and that can be your fallback. But I think it's important to have a foundation in one of the two, build on that, and then transition into product.
That's a great session, Faiz. And I have to say that I do a little bit disagreement on the developer session. I am not a big fan of DS, but yeah, uh, overall your session was really good. No, Faiz, coming down to you with the same question again. So for new designers who are starting, what's your session?
You
Apart
mean
from
to,
what Faiz said.
okay, Mr. Fest, I was like, I think for new designers, like Fest said, I think they should also learn the development side of things, right? But I think there's also more things to learn, like understanding how can you ship faster to them, because while design is an important thing, important step, we have to also consider design, like the developer sprints also, right? For example, you guys have sprints, we guys have sprints, but generally a designer is working in the same pod structure, and generally the ratio is a lot more. Like for one designer, you might have 5 or 10 developers, right? And this is true for any company, right?
Yeah.
So understanding these developers is also very crucial, and forming good bonds with them is crucial, because, and similar goes for the PM and designer duo, right? So as a designer, I would say you're a mediator between product and developer, because you're getting the requirements from product, designing them in order for it to make it quicker for the developers to ship. So tomorrow, if a developer is taking time, it automatically affects the product and overall organization later on. So as a designer, you need to also mediate those two things. So one thing importantly from a designer's perspective for developers is you could understand what makes their lives easier, right? Because like every designer has, I mean, the traditional designers you see, they probably have come from a design background. They don't have a lot of developer or technology knowledge from a tech point of view, right? Because they haven't mainly studied engineering or something like that. A lot of people have nowadays, but if you're coming from a very design focused background, it's easy to get lost in the entire process of, okay, I need to make this visually as beautiful as possible, or this should visually stand out, or hey, can you try something new? Whereas the companies you work for, etc., they might not need that. Developers might get agitated at, okay, why is this getting reintroduced? Why are we introducing a new component here? Or why is this taking so long? Now this has made my life harder. So one thing I could definitely advise for designers is to understand what makes the lives of developers easier. And another part from the PM perspective for a designer would be that if you're a designer and you are thinking in terms of the PM, I think one thing important to learn is about user stories, right? Understand which user stories can you help make simpler, because sometimes design is tagged into that, right? So I would say it's important to also get in these calls with design PMs and solution that together. Like, for example, if a PM is writing a feature and you as a designer are involved, then you know that, okay, I have some involvement, and I know how can I solve this better for making my users' lives better, and how can I ship this faster for developers, right? So these are some important pointers to know. I think there's a lot more to learn. I think that's just a tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more designers can learn. But I think for this one, I think I'll stick to this.
Oh, that's great. Now coming to another side of things, you both are speakers and pretty damn good at that. So what's your suggestion to new speakers? And you guys already did it multiple times for GDG Mat, since, as we already said, every meetup there is at least one speaker who is the first one speaking. So yeah, what's your suggestion to all the new speakers that are in their mind, they want to go to the stage, but they're not confident, right? Or they don't know what to do. So what's your suggestion to them?
One thing that I've recently been talking about with a lot of people, just because I'm back in that mindset of getting people on stage, is that, so I've been giving this talk, which is about finding your feet in a world of tech. right? Because the world of tech is so massive that everyone who is a junior, fresher, college level just doesn't know where to go, right? So I'm giving this talk. One of the things I recommend there is that learn from people around you and eventually become one of those people who people learn from, right? Now, at that point, I receive a lot of questions that, I'm going to take a while to get there. Maybe after 3-4 years of my career, I can become someone whom others learn from. And what I keep going back to is that at any point in your life, you know more than someone who's a year younger than you or even 6 months younger than you. Even if you're a college fresher and the topic is something about filling out admission forms, you know more than someone who is in 12th grade and hasn't done the admission process yet. If you're a second year student, you know more than about the first year subjects than the first year does. So at every point in life, first acknowledge that you know more than a lot of people out there. As much as it might seem to you that you don't know enough, you're looking at the people above you, but take a moment to look at the people below you. So once you start acknowledging that, I think, at least I've seen personally, a lot of people start realizing that yes, there is value that they can add in people's lives. Start with something small. Don't try to become a guru who's teaching people about the most complicated libraries out there. But start with the experiences that you have had. Right? Maybe you're a final year student or a first year in your career who solved a very particular problem at work. Or maybe you put together an event during your college days. You had an experience that most people around you did not. Talk about that experience. Talk about your unique learnings and failings. And just that much is going to have value to people around you. It might seem insignificant to you, but there are going to be people younger than you or even older who haven't had the same experience, who will be able to learn from your failures, who will be able to applaud your successes. And it's never too early to start that journey, right? That is, I think, 90% of my advice. The other 10% is be confident in who you are. Right? A lot of people look up to speakers who have 5 or 6 years of experience, and they get inconfident about their inability to speak English as a language or the inability to capture crowds. It's okay to not have that. We at MAD, we strictly inform all speakers that your talk does not have to be in English. Right? 80% or 90% of India does not speak English. If you want to come and give a talk in Hindi, that's completely okay with us. We will make sure that there is someone who can explain to the audience if there's someone who doesn't understand Hindi. But you be comfortable in the way you are. Give a talk in Hindi. Give a talk without slides. Contact us if you want rehearsals. Just be sure that you are comfortable in who you are, and the world will start accepting you for that. Some of the best speakers I know do not have the best command over English as a language. But once they start talking technical, people stop doing what they're doing and they listen. Right? Conversely, there are some people who may be fantastic at the language. They may be talking an absolute empty talk, right? Maybe it doesn't have any actual content. But just the way they capture the crowd's attention, the way they talk to people is captivating enough that people stop and listen. So understand your strengths, be confident in who you are, and acknowledge that there's always something that you can teach the world. And that's my...
Swapnil, would you like to add something?
Yeah, of course. I think one of the internal jokes we have is never do live demos, please.
I had that
out
experience.
Of 100 times, they fail 99%, 100 times, 99 times it fails. So that, but this is joke aside, I think live demos work, but then you have to also consider that there might be technical issues all the time, right? So one is that. But coming back to new speakers, I think, and I take a very similar analogy from some of the stand-up comedians that we see, right? They have something called open mics, right? An open mic is where you get to do some crowd work, where you get to go and see how people react to your jokes, or see how people will actually, respond, or is there a laugh that's coming? And that's how comedians decide, okay, this thing is working, this thing is not, right? So if you want to become a speaker, or if you want to even give 1 or 2 talks, I think the ideal thing is to just start somewhere, right? So go in one of the smaller meetups. You don't have to, be a rock star, as they call it in the tech terms. You don't have to be a rock star in your job, or you don't have to be a rock star in tech, whatever. You just have to go, and maybe it could be as simple as, okay, how did I add shadow to this button, or how did I code this button, right, from a design system, or something very small. Like, it does not even have to be very complicated. So doing that will actually give you some confidence around, hey, and a lot of the meetups, like at least we at MAD also have flash talks where new people can speak for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And a 10-15 minute talk is a great way for new people to come on stage. Plus also it is very low on time, so that you can just try it out, right? If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So, and I think also the social media has also made us a little bit, look up to these stars who are like already done so well, or influencers, etc., have come across, and they have the best quality camera, they have the best quality stuff out there, and they have like entire video crews shooting their talk or whatever in some conference, right? But they have all gotten there at some point, right? They have not come. Maybe you can ask them, if you like someone in the sense of the whole speaking, someone who's a great speaker, maybe you should ask them how they started. And I most of the time, I think what they will tell you is that you should just start and then figure out the way that is to come. So I think that is also something important. And another thing is, I think you need to also find a style. For example, I know someone in the MAD community who has been phenomenal for the English, right? And they have done a really good job with just speaking in English, and people love them for it. I have a more sarcastic and more self-deprecating tone. Faiz has also a very sarcastic tone at some of his talks. So it's also about having fun. I think one of the biggest things that we forget is, why are you doing it, right? One is you want to encompass that, okay, you know what, I'm teaching something to someone new, or I'm trying to solve with something, right? But at the same time, it's also about having fun, right? If you're not having fun, then your audience is not having fun either. So as much as you can make that very clear, that okay, am I having fun? Am I teaching someone something? Am I learning more about myself? Where am I making mistakes? Should I be slower? And have a critique in the audience. I mean, I think recently we did an event, and I remember one person asking me and Faiz if they could if we could give them feedback at the end of the talk that they had, which is super important as well.
Yeah.
The person you mentioned is actually used to work with Rivu. So just shout out to Karan for being one of the most phenomenal speakers we've had at MAD.
Karan is actually, I will interview Karan as well. I'm just waiting for his availability. So he's a great person, great community, great person overall, right? And he's a great speaker as well. Now, coming down to my last question. So you both did startup mentoring for a long time now, right? You regularly do mentoring for a lot of startups. So what do you see in startup trends, and if anything that you wish the startups did right? Something that you see most of the startups doing wrong very commonly, they are doing it wrong, and you wish that they do it correctly. So if you want to talk about something like that.
For me, it's one glaring problem that I've seen in every startup that I've mentored. And this is including startups who are now unicorns. Like at the Launchpad program, we've mentored startups who are now unicorns, as well as startups who are just trying to break even. So across the entire spectrum, one thing that I've notably been seen lacking is quality user research. So, and it's not just about asking people whether they'll use your product or not, right? But user research is such a more in-depth field. Asking people the right questions, asking them about problems rather than solutions, trying to understand their day-to-day journeys when they come across these problems, the kind of context that they have difficulties in. For example, I was on the design team of one of Mumbai's transit apps, and that's like a 10 lakh DAU app. So for doing user research for that product, it was important that we go to places where people will actually use the app, right? So bus stops, train stations, that kind of thing. It wasn't just about calling people to the office and asking them questions, but interviewing people in that context. And then also about the kind of questions you ask, right? Because culturally, as Indians, we hate saying no. The
Yeah.
amount of times you have probably crossed a credit card guy in a mall or an airport who's telling you that the latest SBI card or the latest Access card, free tickets, milega, Vistara tickets. Uh, we never say no. We just either ignore or we'll say time nahi and we'll move on, right? Because culturally, we don't like saying no.
Yeah.
So it's important not just do user research, but also to do it right. Ask people about their thoughts on a problem. Don't ask them whether they'll use it or not. Don't interview friends and family. They will not try to pull you down in life.
Yeah.
Uh, take notes rather than look for answers. It's a very vast field. Just if you go into types of user research, there are like 20, 25 different methods and techniques. So don't leave it at, I asked a couple of questions to our potential audience and we got positive answers. That's what we're building. The amount of time, effort, and energy you will save on doing quality user research early on just exponentially reflects as you scale the company.
Yeah. A very good session. And Swapnil, do you want to add something to it?
Yeah, I think what Faiz said was also correct. I think user research is very important in that sense.
Yeah.
One thing I would also add is sometimes, I mean, this might not be possible for all the startups, but sometimes it's okay to also sometimes put yourselves in the user's shoes. So I don't know if there were a few examples where a lot of companies, especially Indian companies, I know their CEOs actually go and do customer support, or they actually go and deliver the food to the people. Sometimes it's also important to see the users as yourself, because a lot of the time what happens is once you have a team set up, some people are like, okay, why should I do that? I have a team for that, right? But putting yourself in the shoes of maybe the user or the first last mile contact with the user also tells you on how they are getting the experience, right? This could also mean, okay, let's say if you're going to buy movie tickets, what is the experience over there? Maybe you don't have a phone. Maybe you want to buy the movie tickets directly. How do you go and buy movie tickets, and what's the experience in the theater? How can I make the product better to actually make the theater experience better? Or let's say, for example, you are into a SaaS product, and how are my salespeople selling you the product, or how is the self-serve experience, right? If I'm coming to your product or the website, how is my experience when I'm just signing up? So sometimes you have to put yourself in the user's shoes and go through that journey yourself. And for early stage founders, I think one of the things, at least from mentoring a couple of startups, is what we realized, and I think Faiz would agree on this, is a lot of people try to pitch you while it's a mentorship session, whereas they are trying to pitch you the startup where I'm not an investor, or mentors are not investors. They might be in the future, but they're not currently. So pitching is not going to help. You're here to you're here to find and solve potential problems or get advice on how to navigate them. And secondly, I think also the fact that sometimes you can be open-minded about it, right? For example, if a mentor is saying that, okay, obviously mentors don't have the entire idea. They are just they're just third party trying to give you opinion of something they might not know entirely. They only have industry experience in that sense. So sometimes a mentor might be curious, or sometimes they might feel something is wrong. So I've seen a lot of startups get defensive about that. Okay, no, we are doing this because oh no, this is validated by this. But the idea is we're trying to also understand your perspective on it, or we don't know much about the problem itself, so we're trying to question that. And getting defensive does not help us as mentors, because it's like you're in a defensive mode, whereas we would want you to be in an open-minded mode so we can help you more, right? So I think these 2 pointers is also something I would say that would be really, really helpful for startups and large companies as well.
Yeah, completely agreed. Both on your point, Faiz, and your point, Swapnil. And I don't have any more questions. And thanks for taking this session with me. I am quite sure that my viewers will be really thankful, and it will be helpful for all of them. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
And viewers, if you don't mind, please subscribe to this channel. And leave us a comment on what question you would like to ask in the next session with Rivu. I'm just doing a job, Rivu. Don't worry about
it. Yeah, thank you. That will help me a lot.
No problem.
Thanks, Rivu. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.